Good morning, everybody. This is your favorite aspiring evolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we're all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. That's the Sagamore Bridge behind me. I was at Cape Cod National Seashore earlier today, but to be honest, I think I may have broken a bone in my left foot skateboarding yesterday while I was in Boston. I went to 3 different skate parks, and when I was at the last one, I don't even remember what exactly I did, but today my left foot hurts. It hurts to walk. I can walk, but it hurts if I go far. Anyways, we're going to talk about the default mode network, which is it's a region of the brain that was first discovered by researchers who were studying people that were doing focused tasks. But whenever people were unfocused, this region would light up. It's what we call a large-scale brain network, meaning it involves numerous parts of the brain synchronized together. Now, the reason this is important is because of the implications it has for our mental health. In particular, it displays a heightened level of activation whenever we're introspecting, daydreaming, contemplating the past or future, or thinking about another person's perspective, which, like Aristotle says in the Nicomachean Ethics, is good whenever it's done to the proper extent. Not too much or not too little. But when it's dysregulated, it can lead to mental health disorders such as PTSD, other trauma responses, but even autism, social processing disorders, and loneliness. So the DNM, the default mode network, its primary role is self-focus, episodic memory processing, introspection, and autobiographic memory. And for that reason, it's where our brain decides who we are, right? We've talked about the Atman in Buddhism and the ego in Carl Jung's Jungian psychology. And if we had to put those concepts into an actual physical space in the brain, this is as good a candidate as any. And this regulation of the default mode network has been linked to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and depression, anxiety. In short, one of the main things we've seen it happen in actual scientific studies is with rumination, which is whenever you focus too much on something, in particular with depressive states, where you overthink about your regrets, failures, shame, or anger, which all of us have those things, but whenever you focus on them too often, it comes at a detriment to your own life. What's funny is those are both Stoicism and Buddhism is basically trying to get us to shut down the dysregulated default mode network. So, on the other hand, it's not entirely all negative. It may influence other areas of neural activity, such as creative expression. Whenever the idle mind drifts, goes into daydreaming, it relays information from this part of the brain to other parts. And an organization called Frontiers in Human Neuroscience published a study demonstrating a correlation between default mode network activity and mental imagery and daydreaming. So whenever we're in a creative state, this area can light up. Again, a researcher in particular, Marcus Rachel, discovered the default mode network whenever he was looking at EEG readings, electroencephalograph readings, and whenever the people he was studying were not focused on tasks, this region kept lighting up. There's a correlating brain network that lights up. If you've ever heard of flow, like getting into a flow state, the task positive network is implicated. So in the default mode network involves characteristic patterns, the prefrontal, parietal, and temporal cortices. And the reason why these things are important for us to understand is that we can influence them. Regular meditation and going outside both can decrease the prevalence of faulty signaling in your default mode network. Since overactive default mode networks can increase our risk of anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders, learning to quiet it down can be quite uplifting. 2 well-known ways of modulating default mode network expression are meditation and spending time in nature. That's why you see me outside all the time. Meditation's tranquilizing effect on the mind likely comes as no surprise, as that is kind of what it's touted for in the beginning. However, nature walks, mountaineering, and anything that inspires awe, literally anything that's awe-inspiring, also affect a corresponding decrease in default mode network activity. This can make focusing on the big picture instead of everyday worries a lot easier. And Cognitive and Affective and Behavioral Neuroscience, another well-known journal, published a study linking decreased default mode network activity with regular meditation practices. The people who practiced meditation the most often had the largest corresponding decrease in default mode network activity. And again, the DMN, default mode network, is where we go whenever we go sit into an idle state. Sometimes that state gets dysregulated because of genetics or experiences, trauma, stuff that happens throughout our lives. However, if yours has been dysregulated, you can overcome it by implementing well-known and long practices that are based more on wisdom and now are only beginning to have scientific understanding put behind them, like meditation. Default mode network and social processing. Emotion, perception, empathy, theory of mind, and morality all involve activation of the default mode network. Therefore, it's involved in our understanding and interacting with others, like actually getting where someone else is coming from, perceiving and interpreting other people's emotions, actually understanding how people are feeling. If you've ever struggled to understand what someone else is going through, your default mode network may be out of balance. Inferring beliefs and intentions. If you've ever been unable to read somebody else, could be down to a faulty default mode network activity. And forming moral judgments. An interesting thing is we could look at how the development of this occurs in infants. Barely have a default mode network, but it is fully formed by the time children enter their teenage years. Again, little babies have no concept of self. By the time a teenager is, sometimes their sense of self is a little overinflated, if you know what I mean. Andrews Hanna, another researcher, postulated in a prestigious journal, The Neuroscientist, that it is the neurological basis of the self, which we've discussed before with Carl Jung's ego and Buddhism's Atman. Since it processes autobiographical information, self-reference, and the ability to reflect on your own mental state, this is a plausible hypothesis. Functions related to other people. These right here are just more... So, theory of mind is the conceptualizing of other people's thoughts and what they do and do not know. Our past and process. Yeah. So, altered default mode network activity may impair effective cognition, making you more prone to depressive episodes. When trauma or experience alters the default mode network, it can change how you perceive and relate to social and moral events. So it can change how you relate to the world, which can be difficult for you to adjust to, and we all have to adjust to those things. Lowered connectivity between brain regions is found commonly in long-term trauma victims, such as childhood abuse and neglect, which is associated with dysfunctional attachment patterns. If you struggle with becoming over-attached to people, or with being too aloof even, if you're not in the Aristotelian golden mean on the attachment scale, then it could be because you've had something alter your default mode network activity. PTSD sufferers also show correlating disruption to the default mode network, deepening depending on severity, so the level of dysregulation can fluctuate. And finally, several genes connected to disturbed emotional processing also mess up default mode network processes. And we'll end I wasn't able to do enough research. Again, my foot being hurt has slowed me down a lot more today than I thought that it would. But so the default mode network modulation, how do we actually fix these things? Now, we know that a healthy default mode network activity is good for us and can help with creative expression. Well, acupuncture, deep brain stimulation, meditation, physical activity and exercise, psychotherapy, sleep deprivation, fixing your sleep schedule, psychedelic therapy, meditation, and deep brain stimulation have all shown positive effects on dysregulated default mode network expression. So we'll go into each of those more in tomorrow's video, or in a later video, at least. Probably tomorrow's video, to be honest, since I got so much of this done anyways. But that's the Sagamore Bridge. I am just south of Cape Cod National Seashore. This is a wandering author reminding you that we're all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same. Spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. Hopefully tomorrow my foot will be feeling better so I can actually walk around a lot more easily and skate some, because like, look at this, that's a perfectly skatable path and I don't have my board with me because it would hurt. Anyways, what are you guys doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part. You can count on me to do mine daily. Until next time, I love y'all.